As most of the world faced the all-consuming threat of total atomic annihilation, some saw an opportunity to profit. If at first Vault-Tec didn't truly believe that their vaults would ever become necessary, they soon began to entertain investors on the idea that the apocalypse should happen. As everyday Americans secured their positions in local vaults, behind closed doors, Vault-Tec secured backroom deals with shadowy third parties to use their vaults for whatever horrific experiments they could dream up. Let's explore Fallout's worst vaults. Explained and ranked, we'll dive into 6 vaults that go from bad to worse. From small social experiments that tested the boundaries of pre-war society to horror factories designed to transform its victims in both body and mind, we're here to show them all. Starting with one that strikes at the very core of pre-war American society. Vault 24. Communism through manipulation. As the Great War surged, every facet of pre-war society was weaponized to root out any pro-communist sentiment and report it to the authorities. Children were indoctrinated from a young age to be staunchly against it. Everywhere you went, you'd find propaganda posters designed to instill fear in the minds of every American that they should be worried. Anyone could be a spy wanting to destroy their way of life. The scientists at Vault-Tec wanted to design the perfect method to brainwash civilians into becoming more complacent, to make them less likely to protest low wages and engage in petty feuds, while at the same time being completely loyal to figures of authority. So, when Vault-Tec wanted to be sure they could rewire the minds of their test subjects, they would choose to break the indoctrination fed to them all their lives and replace it with the very thing that they were led to believe was out to get them. To do this, Vault-Tec would restrain and conduct tests on those unlucky enough to arrive once the bombs fell. They would undergo a number of experimental surgical techniques, including hypnosis and neuroimplants. The cruel scientists at Vault-Tec viewed their victims as nothing but guinea pigs. They exploited a human need for shelter and turned it into hell. Just imagine you are chilling in your vault, and suddenly you are called over. You don't know why, but for some reason, you're now being restrained by security and taken to the off-limits medical wing of the vault. You're implanted with a chip on the back of your neck, and suddenly, you lose yourself as an individual. Replace your vault suit with a communist red one, and await further instructions from your leaders. But at least this nightmare didn't last forever. Suddenly, the vault shut down, reasons that are still a mystery. The inhabitants of that vault escaped, and all the scientists were butchered. By the time Lucy and Cooper Howard arrive, all they find are the skeletal remains of vault dwellers, making it seem as though very few people were able to escape. They found them still gathered at tables, others still strapped to medical chairs in the research laboratories, once forcibly made to watch videos meant to brainwash them alongside electrodes implanted into their brains. Poor people really experienced a living hell in these vaults, but this is what they really are. They sold paradise but delivered damnation. This first vault was the most tame on this list. This next vault weaponizes civilization and accepts few. Vault 8. Old world segregation. What happens in a city, if you can call it that, is that everything is wrong with morals and valors. But under this society is ethically correct. Well, everything turns upside down. Let me ask you a question. What happens when civilization not only survives an apocalypse, starts trying to rebuild, and for some reason that it cannot explain immediately decides to fight to the death everyone in hell, almost anything 10 kilometers around? If I was a survivor, I probably had a lot to think about since the bombs. But what happened in this vault was like the exact opposite of what I expected of the wasteland. I mean, after everything you have to live day by day, you come to some really harsh conclusions. But in a world that just got reseeded, it shows really well the past that we also lived in. Discrimination, human rights, everything returned to the old days. So if you like dystopian worlds, then you will be right at home. If you haven't caught it yet, we are talking about Vault City. As I explained before, Vault City is not bad in fundamentals. Why? Because everything we rule as bad is flagged by society, and every action can lead to disruption, a crime, or even something worse. But what if those exact actions land you in a society that has the values shifted? Vault City, formerly Vault 8, at least from the outside, is a pristine model society. Clean streets, bright lights, neat and tidy uniforms, and a proper government. Those things in every other zone is almost impossible to achieve. So everything together is nothing short of a miracle? The perfect cover-up for this place? If you can maintain the look, no one will be suspicious that something is going on here. This is very different from most of the wasteland. But as the saying goes, not all that shines is gold. In this case, that shine comes with a price tag. Massive walls, security everywhere like heavy turrets, and a rigid social order that separates citizens and classes. An extremely disruptive system that works. But why? First of all, Vault 8 opened successfully in 2091 using its Garden of Eden creation hit, and its residents built Vault City. This is a good idea. Nothing harsh yet. Or something wrong. The vault was used primarily for storage and mostly for medical services, but everything else, like the most superficial services, were in the Vault City upper level. And on paper, this was the correct move. Start rebuilding whatever was left. I mean, to put you in perspective, the tech worked. The people were happy to work in the means to achieve something greater for the future of humanity. And for that moment, it meant building infrastructure. This is literally the best case scenario for a vault. With that laid out, let's now focus on why everything is a trap. As always, they never prepared for the worst. And when a leak of the power plant appeared, contaminating the water, medical experts were concerned that this problem could lead to sterility or chromosomal damage. With this, ghouls started to appear. And here it is where the horror starts. Let's start with the basics. The fact that this vault has a sort of system of slavery and caste system, and yeah, is as horrible as it sounds. Just being a little makeup to see it far more beautiful than horrific. The levels in Vault City divide residents into citizens and servants. The names are pretty obvious when you already made the difference between citizens and servants. This is like putting levels and social classes, but with an abysmal difference. The higher-ups and the absolute low ground, right in the dirt. With this, we get a batch of giant problems. For example, the society is very regulated, dull, and basically every one of them that is not on the same level. The citizens are very similar between them, but the disruption is enormous, big enough to not make a good place to be, even if you're a higher up. This also meant the way of reproduction. Children, pregnancies, relationships, etc. was basically a big part of a plan to control the genetics inside the vault. For example, the pregnancies are a 100% planned, and also every point in the process, rather than giving the natural course of things. They manage the autodoc via genetic donations, instead of natural procreation. This also leads to isolationism, xenophobia. I mean, if you live controlled by everything since your birth, then you can get two different paths, and both of them are part of the Vault City highly exclusive way of life, looking down to the people that aren't in your same level. Now imagine what applies to the outsiders. They exist, but basically aren't allowed near anything part of the city. Refusing to help neighboring settlements means that allies are too far out of the table, and also the people get this superior attitude that makes them really, really unlikable. While at some point in the life of this vault, their reactor almost gave up, they eventually fixed it, but this was a really harsh time for the people of the lower side of the classes. They had to ration basically everything. Like if they weren't already limited and that decreased the overall comfort. In the end, this vault is still existing, but is nothing like what was supposed to be, is more similar to the Caesar's Legion than the next step for humanity to become a better world. What makes this vault one of the worst is the fact that once you're in here, you probably will never leave, living only to make the upper side of the vault better. Now, with that aside, what about a vault that makes everyone take a side? Yeah, segregating sectors and basically making them enemies. This next rank you can say is a checkpoint, because this is where we get goosebumps with the next vault experiments, and now we will see how it affects the subconscious when being manipulated. Vault 19, hypnotizing. In my opinion, this is one of the most interesting experiments. Imagine your city being split in two, which each adopting its own colors, and propaganda began to circulate that the other side wants to destroy yours. That's the situation this vault's population had to endure. The experiment here was simple. Split a population in two, and test if you can artificially create conflict between the two simply by circulating propaganda and distrust amongst both groups. While it would be traumatizing to realize you were being puppeted to hate your peers, we cannot deny that they had an interesting idea. In this experiment, there was no resource scarcity or biological superweapon. It was simply people versus people. The vault dwellers of this vault were separated into two different colored sectors, red and blue, limited contact between both groups, and another unique characteristic, they even had different overseers. This alone made this vault very unique, and while in future instances like the series, this was pivoted into something slightly similar, that the more psychological vault experiments are amongst those with the most interesting results. As I explained before, the general idea is having two sides, not exactly rivals, or not at the first glance. Everything kind of revolves around that. Both sides are supposed to be unique, but the other side would never know that, because they were under the impression that they were under the same exact layout. Vault-Tec used subliminal messaging through use of high-pitched noises that only children could actively hear, to push ideas of the other side to further tensions between the two factions, while nothing physically had been done to push the two into conflict. So they had to live with a deeply seated fear that was organically adapted by them. It was part of daily life in such a way that no one would question that they're just mice trapped in a maze. For the point to be understood better, let's go through what a normal day here would be like. as you conduct your day-to-day activities. No matter where you are fed subliminal messaging at all times. You can't really hear what it's saying, but on a subconscious level, you do. Over time, more people share their resentments for the other side, and hatred boils over. There were even terminal entries where vault dwellers note smelling weird air coming out of the vents, so we can almost 100% assure that the chemicals agents were used to further spread the paranoia. Vault-Tec introduced a wild card that could have shifted the experiment in either direction. At the center of the red versus blue conflict was a doctor that wore neither color, taking care of both sides equally. A simple premise was found in this vault. Strange things happened from time to time, and almost always, something or someone pinned this on the rival group, like flickering lights on certain patterns to sort of induce the people with the impression of having a meaning behind. To nobody's surprise, this was just the beginning, strange things to say the least. For starters, we had from time to time certain disruptions and rare things that started to happen, and slowly but surely both sides started putting the blame on the other side. Maybe this will strike as obvious, but every one of those infiltrations or things that broke under suspicious circumstances, everything was orchestrated by both overseers in tandem, each doing their part in the experiment. In the end, the experiment may have been considered a complete success by Vault-Tec, as paranoia and hate started to brew inside every one of them. While exploring the vault in Fallout New Vegas, we can find multiple problems that are not explained in the scenery, but this is not at all wrong. All this is explained through terminal entries, to focus on the most crucial one, or at least the one that, in my opinion, was the straw that broke the camel's back. The culmination of all the stressors that Vault-Tec had designed would take place when one of the most important resources for survival was sabotaged: the water supply. Someone disrupted the water source, and the two now opposing factions would blame each other, though rather this was by design or simply a failing water chip. Who knows? Sadly enough, the exploration only tells us that the fight exploded in this particular moment, and we only see destruction and remnants of fighting all over the vault. In the moment that we enter here, all these years later, we won't find vault dwellers waiting to give us the answers, but that's the interesting part of the contextual storytelling. You see what happened here through the environment, but you're left to make the final conclusion for yourself. This vault was abandoned when the powder gangers arrived, so that leaves us with two questions. Did they come to their senses in the end and left what would have been their tomb? Or did they finish each other off? So, to confirm the facts, we can assume, or at least say, that the most probable option is the second, as every terminal heavily blames the other team for any problem that the vault had. The point is that nobody lived or stayed in the vault to tell the tale. We may never know the outcome of the fights, or even what exactly went there. They actually hated each other, or they discovered the truth and killed both overseers. That's the magic of the contextual storytelling. We may someday meet an actual survivor, or not. So now to continue. What about a vault where the experiment is to see how people react to a faulty vault and eat all the radiation that they can without dying in the process? This is where the most disturbing experiments begin. But almost no one knew about what was going inside or what was happening. With this, the nightmare vaults begin. Vault 12. Outside world. Inside. The fundamental here was to have a vault that also was some sort of trap, and oh boy if this was dangerous. They were constructed under Bakersfield, the sprawling metropolis. This vault is full of special characteristics. Obviously talking only about the appearance, for example, it had every amenity that any vault dweller could imagine. And even more, a top-notch vault if I have ever seen one. One of the most unique is that the vaults normally had the correct amount of water to live comfortably for some time, but this one had a serious upgrade. We know for a fact that they had the serious accommodation of having fresh water every day. After a nuclear apocalypse, not having to ever worry about water was a blessing anyone would be happy to exploit. To put numbers out there, we are talking of more than 15,000 gallons of fresh water per day. That was the normal amount that you could net on a normal day. Those who had been accepted into this vault were chosen because of how serious they were in post-nuclear preparations. With Vault-Tec creating a Pressed Vault Suit Award to congratulate them for their efforts, this vault had everything a pre-war American could ask for. More than enough luxuries to keep dwellers occupied for hundreds of years. But that was all a farce. What Vault-Tec had in mind for this vault was that it would test how subtle radiation exposure would affect a population over time. A population that couldn't see it coming and were generally living happy lives. When they entered the vault, Vault's hatch would appear to close behind them. But in reality, it would stay ever so slightly opened and let in radiation gradually over time. Over time, some dwellers would start to feel the effects of radiation poisoning, while others would undergo the transformation into ghouls, though most would retain their sanity. Some could survive, and others survived without a mind. For starters, not all the ghouls became feral, but at that moment, being ghouls was something completely new, so everyone was really freaked out. One of the vault dwellers was even unlucky enough to transform into glowing ferals. Though these acted far different than their normal counterparts, they guarded the vault's water chip and only become hostile if you attempt to take it. As an additional note, they won't attack you either if you can repair the water pump. This makes the water chip kinda useless, and they won't attack you if you take it afterwards. So it is a bit strange that they can make that deep of a thought and still are gone and dusted. These next two vaults are two of the worst, with the first transforming its dwellers much like what Vault 12 had done, but in a more direct way like the scientists at Vault 24. Vault 87 failed super soldiers. This vault should be familiar to anyone who has played through the third Fallout game, as it plays a key role in completing the main story. The experiment revolves around the mutagenic virus known as the Force Evolutionary Virus, FEV, and pre-war experiments with it that were aimed at creating super soldiers. Who knows why Vault-Tec and the US military wanted to continue experimenting with FEV after the world as we know it was destroyed? Perhaps with Vault 87 being close to the Enclave's stronghold at Raven Rock? They could have been monitoring the experiments to further development if there was any success. This experiment consisted of injecting humans with FEV and perfecting the virus to create super soldiers that would conquer the wasteland. While they would be successful at this to some degree, what would happen to the scientists that conducted the experiments was far from what had been planned. They injected both male and female humans, and the results were far more shocking than any scientist could have imagined. After a while, they would undergo a metamorphosis, becoming more streamlined, developing upper body strength. A more robust skeletal structure with skin would become yellow-green, and their bodies would become more streamlined, losing all traits of sexuality. Their increased strength would cause the scientists to be driven to rush testing, discovering the subjects to exhibit a resistance to radiation and other environmental hazards. Some test subjects were terminated after 14 days, as some of them began to decline in mental capacity and experience sudden death due to massive loss of her brain functions. As for the rest, they experienced increased levels of anxiety and rage caused by mental degradation. Experimentation didn't lead to a good ending. These scientists were working with forces that could not be controlled. Some of the test subjects, who would later go on to be called super mutants, broke free and overwhelmed Vault security. They didn't even know what hit them. They would liberate the other super mutants and force the rest of the Vault dwellers to become super mutants just like that had been. And eventually they escaped this vault and wreaked havoc on the surface. Their reign of terror over the capital wastes lasted for nearly 200 years until the Vault's supply of FEV started to run out, and without the FEV, they had no way of replenishing their numbers. They would die off soon after the events of Fallout 3. Enduring harsh experiments just to mutate into flawed super soldiers, they would be transformed into beasts who only sought to spread their curse. Even without talking a lot about this vault, the cruel reality of it secures its place as one of the worst ones. But last is not least. There can be only one worst, and that has to be Vault 75, an experiment so cruel that it focused its horrors on children. Another super soldier experiment, but this one would throw less desirable subjects into a meat grinder to be disposed of. Vault 75. New Gen. Playing through Fallout 4, Vault 75 is easy to miss, but the messed up nature of the experiment conducted there cannot be overlooked. Much like the Vault-Tec sought to create a race of super soldiers through selective breeding and eugenics, butchering anyone they saw as an inferior product to the others. Here I will affirm what I said earlier, that they sold the Vaults as a way to escape the horrors of a nuclear apocalypse. This happened with the Malden Middle School, sold as a safe place where the kids can go in case of a nuclear war. The children that escaped into the vault would have their hormones manipulated to accelerate their growth. They would even be given genetic modifications. And when they matured, their embryos would be manipulated to have favorable genetics. No parent thought that all of this would have happened to their children, but safety first, they say. And in order to keep them out of possible war, of course, they spent a lot just to have them in the vault. But when the bombs fell and families arrived at the vault, parents would be separated from their children and killed by the staff members and the kids. You know their fate. They would all become the first generation of the refinement of human genetics experiment. This experiment was meant to last over decades, many generations until the time of the perfect genetically modified human was created or until the directors of Vault-Tec decided that the experiment was a success and decided to open the vault. This experiment is a prime example of how cruel Vault-Tec's experiments were and their willingness to go with any idea. You only need one suggestion from a madman with a plan, and now they're raising children to harvest their desirable genes. Would you imagine how many nights they must have cried for their parents, and as they were forced into maturing at a younger age? The new generation of these children were taught to fear the upland, a new name for the wasteland that they used to control the children and keep them trying to escape, which worked, but not for too long, as there only needed to be one stray lamb to cause the whole vault to fall apart. By stray lamb, I mean a fighter, the one who questions if this is right or if it really is, the truth that they made them believe. It only took a few decades for the children to organize a rebellion with help of a scientist, who would have been one of the original test subjects recruited into the ranks of the Vault's scientists. With this, they all left their home, and now it has been taken by gunners as a base. We can say that this was bound to happen. It was a ticking time bomb that eventually exploded. These kids met a good ending in the end. They had to endure a lot for decades, all the experiments and their pursuit of the perfect human being. The wasteland does not forget the experiments that Vault-Tec conducted on millions of unsuspecting civilians, with not even children spared their cruelty. This has been my ranking of the worst vaults in Fallout. If you enjoyed this video and want to see why bottle caps are still the Fallout currency after 200 years, click the video on the screen.